simplify production, Kairos can control multiple external devices, whether those are playback decks or PTZ cameras or robotics, graphics generators. All of that can be controlled and triggered through Kairos. To set up those controls and those triggers, I've navigated to our input settings here. So let's start with controlling a PTZ camera. So right now we have a PTZ camera coming in on input number 5. In order to assume control of that camera through our Kairos software, first I want to select that input. Now on the right hand side in our parameter view, I want to navigate to our PTZ trigger settings. Opening up this menu reveals all of the information or settings that we need to adjust before we can enable PTZ control. Currently for PTZ control, we only support Panasonic PTZ cameras. So the first thing we want to do is select that Panasonic protocol. From there, if we know the IP and port number of the camera we want to control, we can click our pencil, type in that IP address and port, and then deselect edit mode, and we can lock into that camera. Or we can simply hit our drop down here and we're able to view all of the PTZ cameras that are currently available on your network. So for input 5, that's going to be our UE150, and that's our top track camera. So if you relabel or rename your cameras on their system interface, you'll get that nice name here. Otherwise, if it's just plugged in and not renamed, you'll get their default model number as their name. Again, I'm selecting the top track, and once I've made that selection, that UE150 top track, I can see the IP and port information has already been added automatically for me. The last thing to do is simply to enable that parameter. Now I get a green OK message and the device self-detected to be a UE150. Now I have assumed control over this PTZ camera. And I can see that if I navigate to my input settings here under config, I look at IP5. Now I can see I have a PTZ icon there, and all of the presets that live on that camera head are now showing up as selectable, recallable, as well as pan, tilt, zoom controls at the top of my screen here. And my joystick as well can be delegated to control this input. Jumping back to our input settings here, in addition to controlling a PTZ camera, I can also control playback deck. So to enable playback deck control, let's say input 7 we're using for playback from one of our decks here. We want to first select the input, jump to our VTR control, open up that setting, and again we need to know the connection IP address and port number for that control. For today we're using 10.25. And this is a Blackmagic deck, and so their standard port of control is 9993. And I can select their protocol here from our drop-down menu. I can select what channel I need if necessary. This one is a single playback deck, so it's locked in. And before I enable playback, I will deselect my edit mode. Now I will enable playback, and we can see we've connected to the Blackmagic HyperDeck, and so now we've assumed control over that deck for things like playback. And I can see that now if I jump down to my inputs menu, input 7 here, I get a new icon noting external device, and I can see the names of all of those recordings that are currently on that drive, and I can play them back from the software here. Jumping back to our input settings, we also have the ability to trigger ROS expression CGs. So that's going to be our next set of controls down here. Again, simply open up the settings menu, select the protocol, enter the IP address for that expression that you're going to assume control over, and the port number. Once you do that, enable that input and you'll get that same green check mark. Similarly, we can do the same thing with Tuning S software, so our Technopoint solution for robotics cameras. Select Tuning S, click the gears here to enter the appropriate IP information. When you do that and you have those servers up and running, you'll be able to connect and control those devices through that same inputs page. Of course, in these productions, there's so many different things that you need to be responsible for as far as technical presentation. Kairos is giving you the ability to put one touch point, one macro to trigger a bunch of different external devices while still doing your switch. So that's why it's important to know what options you have available as far as internal and external triggers that you can fire from Kairos.